All right, so today we'll talk a little bit more about the homework, and then primarily talk about TCP and some more details about reliable transport in general. The homework, I don't have my server out there yet, and so I think we'll have to push back the deadline a little bit. Doesn't seem quite fair. That said, I think on your side you can you have everything you need to get started, to get normal peer-to-peer communication going. So you should be able to telnet in, let's say, start a number of these peers, have them each connect to one of their other peers, and then telnet into two of them, any two of them, say something on one end, and it should show up on the other end, no matter which peer you're connecting to. And an interesting experiment that we will certainly try in grading will look like this. So we have a few peers. Maybe let's just start like this. So this is the failover part, right? So these are our peers, and then of course we have a couple of telnet clients talking to them. You know, who knows how many they are, doesn't matter so much. But now at some point there's this chat session going on, and then this peer, you kill it. You control C that process, and it should still work, right? That's the point of the failover, that each node announces like, oh, and if I go away, you should be talking to this other node. Usually it's pretty easy to select which is the failover peer. It's whoever that you connected to before. Right, so the failover, let's put this back. For this guy, if it connected to there and then this one connected to this one, this node would announce to this peer that, oh, that's your failover peer. Right, connect to that one if I'm not around. For this one, there is no need to announce a failover. Nobody depends on this node. But then there's one more case, and that's this one. If we flip the orientation of this, not to be a way to flip that, but anyway, go like this. So this is the node that started it all. And then these two peers connect to it. Now, which one should it announce as a failover peer? There isn't a parent of this peer. Right? It was the first one, the progenitor of it all. So in order for this to work always, it needs to consistently announce the same peer to everyone else. Right? So in this case, maybe it picks this one. So then it would not announce any failover peer to that one. This is going to be the new parent, and when this node dies, everyone else, in this case this one, is responsible for connecting to this other peer instead. So as long as it consistently picks just one failover peer, then you'll have a way to recover from failure of one node at a time. All right? You could conceivably, two nodes could go down at the same time, and then we can't recover from this. But if you quickly connect to another one, then at least there's only a short period where such a double failure could happen. In a double failure scenario, you would end up with a segmented network. If we imagine many peers now, you could end up with, say, two subtrees not having any connection between them. Okay. And then there's the load balancing piece, and the general idea is a node will only allow so many peers to connect. So it might tell you the failover, not a failover, with the load balance, it'll say connect to that peer instead, not to me. Right? That's all there is to it. So I didn't put specifics about that in the homework description yet. I think we'll limit it to 3 peers. So if there's more than 3, you should start getting these messages. And you should start sending those messages as well. If you have 3 connected to you and said, I am a peer, right? You're sort of a child peer. then it's time to tell one of them to go. All right. Anything else on the homework? Yeah?
Do you know a way to run multiple nodes on the same computer?
Oh, yeah. You just have to specify a different port. So just like we discussed here, all right, the job of the transport layer, in this case you're using TCP, is to identify which application the packet should go to. In TCP, it's identified by this port number. So we'd said 8080, right? That was sort of in my example. Only one application can use that number on any given host for natural reasons, because otherwise a packet comes into port 8080, transport layer won't know where to put it, like who to give it to. So you would start, in fact, I can just do that. So if I say 8080, then it'll say address already in use, but if I say 8081, we're good. I must have, I was playing with this last night, I think, so it's probably running somewhere in the background, one on 8081. But anyway, you will also find that if I do this and I try running again, this time it was okay. Okay, if you close it, then it's okay. But if it crashes, you'll find that this port is still in use. Right? The application hasn't quite let go of it yet. And so you'll have to use a different port for a little while. There's a timeout of a minute or something, and then it comes back and you can use it again. Yeah?
Yeah, but how do you get them to connect to each other?
Oh, I see. Yeah. That's part of the homework. All right.
No,
that is
on the same computer.
Yeah. So it's
But you're sharing the port.
No. Let's see. I must be misunderstanding part of the question.
Okay, so you launch one and you put dash dot node or dot dash node 88. And you launch another one, you do dot dash node space localhost space and then 88. You have to specify the port.
Yeah. So you would say, localhost can sometimes resolve. For some reason, it doesn't resolve to this address, but that's the correct address. Localhost should work too. And then you say which port to connect to.
That's how you write it?
This is the expected command line syntax.
I didn't see it on the website like that. It was just node address port. That's all I saw. Yeah, just. So I was trying to figure
Oh, I see. That's an important bug in the description. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Every peer would have to listen to its own port for this to work on the same machine. Let's see. Where does it say even?
it says peer port.
Yes.
Well, that's just the command you sent.
Right. So where does it specify how you should be using it?
Well, it was on Piazza.
Okay.
TA.
Yeah, okay. Right. Yeah, so it would have to be like this. I'll put that in the description. It would have to be like, which port am I listening to? Who do you want to connect to, and what port are they listening to? Yeah. Thank you for the question. Yeah?
And the second argument, you put an IP address in here. Does that have to work with the domain name too? Or just an IP address?
IP address is fine, yeah. Let's not worry about the resolution. Although it's not it's an easy thing to look up, get adder info, and you're done. Anything else? Oh, all right. So we were talking about, not this, but this. We were doing it in a picture. Just go back one and see. How do I switch to the previous ones? Option? No. Command? Come on. Previous, there it is, okay. All right, okay, so we were dealing with this thing. we're starting up our reliable transportation protocol over this unreliable network. We're sending a message with a sequence number in it to identify it. That's very handy. We sent it over, and then the receiver necessarily sends an ACK back because we can't trust that the network layer delivers the packet. And now the sender is happy. But if we lost the ACK, okay, first of all, if we lost the packet, pretty easy. After some timeout, which we'll have to discuss in more detail today, after some timeout, we'll send another packet because we didn't get an ACK back. Okay, and so that's okay. But what about if we lose the ACK? Well, then we can rely on the sender sending the packet again, and that's where we ended last time. Can we though? Now we have a problem. So say that in this packet it says, like, transfer $100 to my friend. Now we sent it twice, and the sender received it twice, so now we're transferring $200. Doesn't quite work. So we need something more. It's not quite as easy as it first seems. I mean, so one thing that's relatively easy, we could just say, oh, like, if haven't seen sequence number, deliver it. All right? So we just remember which sequence numbers we've seen, and if we haven't seen sequence number 1 yet, then it's okay, we deliver it to the application. It's fine, right? That'll work. Any concerns? Yeah.
Out of order?
Well, if we haven't seen this particular sequence number. Yeah.
Oh, so what if you want the application to do something repeatedly, and like you're expecting more package, like duplicate package?
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. So we could send, if we actually want something done again, it would be okay, I think, to send a new packet with sequence number 2, and then, yeah. Otherwise, if we wanted it done twice, and we don't want to send two unique packets, we can just send one packet and say, do it twice, I think. There's something else that's not so good here.
What if they did some sort of handshake before they started exchanging information? So they knew that there was like some session eventually.
I think that's a good part of the solution. Right now I'm looking for what the problem is. Why don't we just do it this way? Unreliable? I think it's totally reliable. Like, sequence number either has shown up or it hasn't. So I'm not going to get any duplicates. And I'm getting the packet eventually because we're sending this ACK. So it's good. There's something else that's a little iffy here. A couple things. One has to do with performance.
Every new client that starts to send packets will start from sequence number 1. So
That's a good one. Okay, so that's not performance. This is a real consistency problem, right? Someone else sent sequence number 1, so now I can't use it. So I send my first packet, and it never gets delivered because someone used sequence number 1. Problematic. That's a problem. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, like, if you're resending all these packets, then aren't you contributing to congestion?
Yes, I think if we do a lot of retransmissions, that can be a real problem. But in this case, we're resending the packet because we lost the packet. And that's, I think, what are we going to do? Right? It'd be better if the network didn't lose packets. Generally speaking, the network will lose a small fraction of packets. Like, if there isn't too much congestion, too much noise in the radio bands and things, you know, maybe you'll lose 1 out of 1,000 packets, 1 out of 100, something like that. If you're 100 is bad. 1 out of 1,000 probably okay. On a wired network, much less than that. At least in a local wired network. Okay, no, so let's start with that. Like, we're using up sequence numbers, so we can't use it again. That's terrible. Right? And by the way, some other receiver, how would they know that I used sequence number 1? So some other guy starts sending packets. For some reason, his packets don't get delivered because I used up his sequence numbers. That's not going to work, right? So, all right, so we have to send something more in the packet. So we can say source IP, right? If we have the source IP and the sequence number, let me should be an E in there. Oh. All right, this is better. All right, so now I keep track. If I haven't seen this IP sequence number pair, then deliver it to the application. All right, what do you think? Yeah.
It would still be problematic because everybody can be sharing that one public IP address.
Who are everybody? You mean different laptops, let's say? Yeah, it can be even simpler than that. What about different applications on the same machine? Of course, you could say, oh, the OS should be aware of what sequence numbers have been used on this machine, never use it again. But yeah, definitely for different machines, it'd be a hard coordination problem there. So just the source IP address, that doesn't seem to quite do it. We need something more. I think if we put the source port too, then at least this will identify the application. And for the sort of special case of sharing an IP address, this, and we'll find out this later, this is how a NAT gateway works. It sort of identifies different machines on the back end as different applications via this port. So we have the source port and the source IP address and the sequence number. And now port. Now we should be okay, right?
What's this stack up with every new client? I think the list will go with every new client.
Yeah, this seems pretty bad, right? How do we compute this? Basically, we need an enormous hash table, I think. And it keeps getting bigger and bigger over time. It's really not such a good idea. Yeah, in fact, we need to know when to forget, I think. So this brings us to this session part. Generally speaking, we don't do reliability for a single packet. I think it's in part because of this. Because it's really hard to coordinate this thing. Like, how do we know how long we should be remembering that, oh, I've already received this packet? What is this unique packet? Like, the unique sequence numbers are really not such a good idea. And usually, we want to send more than one packet together anyway. We want to have, like, there's a big file transfer, or we're requesting a web page or something like that, right? So we want all of that data all together. So what we can do instead is sort of make a group, establish a session. So we say, oh, hello receiver, I want to talk to you, right? And after that, the receiver knows that, okay, this guy wants to talk to me, so now I keep remembering what I've seen from this receiver. And then when we stop talking, I can forget all about it. Right? Now we have a much smaller, at least, hash table, if we have to deal with a hash table. So, in fact, the way that we deal with this in TCP, at least, is we go also destination IP, destination port. So let's ignore the sequence number for a moment. This is called a session identifier. I think that's what it's called. So a session identifier is, okay, there should be two different ports. Destination port, source port. So if I, let me just do a TCP dump here, so we can see some of those. Okay, actually, we do it with a -n, so we get a little better, just numbers. Oh. I didn't get any output there because I was talking to the HTTPS version of the server. That's port 443, and I was just asking for port 80, for port 80 dump there. Okay, here's the connection. Okay, so this is actually what's going on when we establish that connection. And I hope it's talking TCP. Sure looks like it. For a while there, Google was trying to establish a new transport layer protocol called Speedy or something. It doesn't look like they're using that, so we're good. Okay, so here we go. My IP address, my source port. And the source port, you just pick it at random. Like I want to establish a new connection. I'll pick one that isn't already in use, already talking to this guy, this remote server at this port. So I make sure when I establish a new connection, and this is what we call connect, right? There's, we haven't really talked about the socket API. I'm assuming that you're familiar with it from 361. Who isn't? Okay, good. So I won't repeat that then. So we say socket, that just tells the OS, like, okay, I need a new file descriptor and I'll tell you what to do with it later. So now we have that integer. And then we say connect. And so then we're passing it an IP address and a port saying, I want to talk to that host, right? The OS already knows what our IP is. So it'll just assign that to the session. Although you can tell it explicitly, if your machine has many IP addresses, you could also bind your socket to a particular local address so that the source address becomes that, whatever it is you want it to be. But generally speaking, you don't. And then the OS will also pick a port. You can also bind the port if you want the source port. And as long as this remains a unique quadruple, what's it called? Is it a quadruple, really? It's kind of an unfortunate name. There's quintet and a triplet, but there's no quartet. That's it. Thank you. This quartet, as long as it's unique, then the OS will be okay with it because we have a unique session identifier, and it's the same on both sides, right? So we send a packet over to the other end. We say, oh yeah, I want to establish a connection with you, right? And all of this information is already in it. Because we said who we want to talk to, and we necessarily have to include who we are. Like, how can you reach me? So that's my source port, that's my application, and my source IP. So I kind of got randomly assigned a source port. Source port usually is not important at all. And there'll be a number, generally speaking, over 32,000, what is it? 2 to the power of 15. Right. Okay, so now we have a unique ID, and then what's going on? In fact, this is the wrong one. That's something finishing. This is better. Here's me starting a new connection. This is the old connection dying. That's an F. That's a finish something. We'll maybe look at the details later. So here, I'm saying, okay, I want to connect to you. S here says syn. Like let's synchronize, let's get going, right? Establish this connection. That's what we're saying here. See. All right, so we sent our connection, and now the server knows, okay, they want to talk to me. So what it'll send back, in fact, there is a sequence number in here too. So now this is a very unique packet, right? It's unique because it says, I want to establish a new connection. And those we kind of have to remember a little bit more than others, I suppose. So So now we're remembering that there's an ongoing connection establishment happening, right? And we reply back with the sequence number and all of this stuff. Of course, the source IP and destination IP are flipped now because it's a different sender. So we say, okay, this actually, we call this a SYNAC. A SYN. I'm using these terms only because that's what TCP uses. It's not that it's so important. But we need to say in the packet that we are trying to establish a new connection. All right, so we say back, okay, SYNAC, yes, I acknowledge we're going to have a new connection. In fact, we have an ACK sequence number. And then just for the heck of it, we will also say, here's my sequence number. Okay, so we could, in principle, start with sequence number 1 here, right? Because we have a unique new session. We're starting up a session. No one else is using this. It's going to be really hard for someone else to start using our session ID because the IP is unique and the operating system knows all of the ports that are in use at the moment, so it's not going to happen by mistake that you're using the same session ID. Although it could happen that this sender crashes, right? The OS crashes. You start up again, and then you try to connect, and this receiver says, no, like, we already have an ongoing session here, what's wrong with you, right? So in fact, we have to deal with that, and I think we should look at the TCP RFC later on to see specifically about how we handle some error conditions. But let's not worry about that sort of thing right now. Okay, so we say SYNAC. This is my sequence number. It starts out saying, oh, my first sequence number is this. We pick a random sequence number in the 32-bit range. And it has to do with error recovery, like for a crash, but also so that people can't pretend to be us. It's much better if no one else knows what my first sequence number was. We'll see why in a little bit. And the server responds saying, okay, I got your first packet with the sequence number, and then, by the way, my first sequence number is this. Okay, so now we have, well, we're almost done. Like, we need one more packet. Right? The sender needs to send back now, like, oh yeah, I got your SYN request, and I know that this was the sequence number that you want me to start with. Right? So now everything's set up. This is called a three-way handshake. They know what to expect, we know what to expect, everything's ready, and then we can start sending data. And in fact, you could send data with this one too. It's not important, but the three-way handshake, if you want to have a connection established and you don't want to send any data, you have to do it 3 ways like this, and then leave it alone. There's something similar, yeah.
Is the sequence number incremented after the receiver receives the SYN?
Yeah, so here it'll be, when you receive a packet, it'll be like increased by, I think it's just 1 byte for the SYN. Generally speaking, for every time you send some bytes, it'll be increased by that many bytes in TCP. Generally speaking, we don't have to worry about bytes. Like, we have to have a unique sequence number. That's the main thing. Okay, so now, coming back to our reliable transport protocol, our kind of easy reliable transport protocol, now the sender wants to send a packet. So there's a new sequence number here, I guess. Well, let's call it sec1. So we want to send a packet. We'll send her over, and I ignore the session ID, but that's also part of the packet. It has to be, because otherwise the receiver doesn't really know what we're talking about. Sequence number is local to a unique session ID. That's really good, because now everyone else has their own session ID, and we don't have to coordinate sequence numbers with the rest of the world, which would be a real pain. Okay, so I send my packet over, and then I get an ACK back saying, yes, I got sequence number 1. Okay, So now we say session ID. Let's do it like that. What do you think? It's really nice about this now. It's like when this then later on is shut down, there's a matching fin bit you can set in the header. You say, I don't want to talk to you anymore. That's what's going on over here. There the browser said, let's not talk. Once we see that, then we can just forget all about all of these sequence numbers and reclaim all that memory. So that's already really efficient, right, compared to our previous setup. Still some problems though. What do you think? Can we do this better? Or there's still a performance problem. Yeah.
Does it have to do with having seen this session ID? Because it could be the opposite session ID.
That's not really the problem, but you're pretty close. Problem is probably this pair here. Right? We still have to keep this big hash table. So if you're downloading a big movie, right? How many are we talking about? Every packet is about a kilobyte, a little more than a kilobyte most. And it's gigabytes of movie. So we're talking about millions of packets, and so millions of entries for this ongoing connection. And it could potentially be a very long-going connection. Or if you're a supercomputer and you're uploading your latest results to some data store in the other part of the country, we're talking about very large volumes here, and it's just really not practical. So we can do better.
Where did the sequence number pair come from?
So we're sending a sequence number here saying packet number 3, and then we have this unique session identifier. So I think this has a real advantage in that we track for every individual packet whether we got it or not. So we could get 1,000 packets, and then one of those we missed, and then we know that we can receive that one again, and we won't deliver any of the other ones again. That's really a good advantage, but there's a big cost to tracking this big hash table, using all that memory just to kind of remember so we don't deliver duplicate packets. Yeah.
We can just store the largest sequence number that we acknowledged last, and then compare this with that one.
Okay. All right, let's see. I will have to put this in here now, I think. We'll just write it down. Right, so we could remember how to deal with duplicate packets. We could remember unique session and sequence number pairs, or we can remember what we acknowledged last, the most recent. Okay, if we remember the most recently acknowledged packet, that's pretty good. So now we send one packet over, and we sent the ACK. Actually, I don't know if it's all that good. So we sent the ACK, but they didn't receive the ACK. All right. There's something more we need here, right? Okay, let's continue along this line. So let's try it. So we send the first packet. It makes it over. We send the ACK back, And now we've sent it, so we're not going to deliver this to the application again. But of course, they didn't get the ACK, right? We lost the ACK along the way. So now the client has to send the packet again, and we get it. And we see, well, we've seen this one already, so we drop it. I guess it all works if we acknowledge it again, right? We don't deliver it again, but we acknowledge it again. Then we're pretty okay. All right. But what we're forgetting is that usually the internet is kind of a fat pipe, but it's really long. So if you want to communicate over the internet, I'm trying to make a good water analogy, but it doesn't really work. Oh yeah, we can use those funny plastic ducks. Right? So we're sending the bath duck downstream to our receiver somewhere else. So we send one, and we wait until they got it, and then I don't know how it comes back, because they can't go backward, but that's okay. Never mind. So we get it acknowledged somehow, right? And then we drop another one in the stream, right, after it's acknowledged. But you see, this is going kind of slow, and we want to deliver a large group of ducks here. So it'd be much better to just dump them all in the river, and they all get down there, and then we get them all acknowledged and we're set. So if the dumping them all in the river equivalent would be, we're sending more than one. So we'll send two of them, right? So they travel together over here, and it really is like this. Like they will go in like a little train down the river of the internet here. Like, oh no, the train of ducks down the river of the internet, and eventually they will be received together, more or less back to back. But it could potentially be a very long one. Actually, maybe we should try to calculate how long that could be. Like how many packets could it be? This is called the bandwidth delay product. So if we have, say, a 1 megabit per second link to Europe, and it's 100 milliseconds to Europe, round trip, let's say. How many packets can we have in flight before we can get an acknowledgement from the server? Right? That's basically how many ducks can we put in this river before the first acknowledgement comes back. So it takes 100 milliseconds to get the first acknowledgement. How fast can we push these ducks out if we assume for now, and this is very simplistic, that it's a single pipe going all the way over to Europe, there are no buffers or anything in between? Then that would be the bandwidth multiplied by the latency, 100 milliseconds, right? So we can send 1 megabit per second, which means 100 kilobit in 100 milliseconds, right? A tenth of a second. 100 kilobit, and one packet is, call it, let's see, 100,000 divided by 8. That's kilobytes, right? And then divide by 1500. Okay, so to Europe, using these very naive assumptions, we could have 8 packets in flight at the same time. In fact, we have to have 8 packets in flight at the same time if we want to get the maximum throughput of a connection to Europe, right? With a 1 megabit, which is relatively slow, and a 100 millisecond latency, which is realistic. All right, so we're going to have to do it this way to be okay. So, so now we have a choice here. This actually works really well with the hash table. We just send all 3 over. Let's have a shorter link, a thinner link, or a lower latency, so that we only need to have 3 packets in flight, because I don't want to draw 8. Okay, so I send 3 of them over, and then we ACK each one of them individually. And the moment we get the first ACK, then we can send the next one. So, so then I send my sec4. Right? And then I get the sec2, so then I can send it, oh, sorry, like this. All right. But then we lose one. So now we remember, we still do this thing with the hash table. So we remember that we've received all these 3 packets. We delivered all these 3 packets to the application. But we only acknowledged 2 out of 3, so we get a retransmission of one of them. Yeah?
So I think last time we talked about how before you sort of reach a steady state, initially packets will be dropped because the client, the sender doesn't know how much the receiver can accept, like in terms of...
It actually works the other way around. We'll talk about the sort of startup process to measure the bandwidth and things in maybe next time. But yeah, there's not going to be many lost packets initially. You start out very conservatively with a round trip time of up to 3 seconds. You wait for 3 seconds before you got to try again with a response and send just 1 packet and so on. Yeah.
So my question would be, knowing that, would you attach sort of like jump packets in front just to measure the because you know you're going to lose some packets anyway, except you said it starts at
Yeah, so I think nobody likes wasting the bandwidth, so you wouldn't probably do that. Another potential risk of, I guess we're going a little out of order here, but you could imagine doing this, like you just blast out and see how much went across, and then base your rate on that. Problem is, it could be a pretty sensitive destination and a lot of other people wanting to use it. And now you send like your 100 megabit connection here from the university, and no one else can use that server for a while. Right? So you really need to be careful in the beginning because you know nothing about the destination. It's called slow start in TCP, and we'll see it a little bit later. This is still sort of a high level discussion here, but what's happening is, right, so now we acknowledge these 2, and the sender knows that, okay, or thinks that we didn't get sequence number 2, so they'll retransmit that, still pretty good, and then we'll act number 2. But in fact, we did get sequence number 2, so we should be able to do a little better than this. In particular, because this is a sequence of packets. Right? In a stream-based communication, you generally, you want all of them to arrive and in order. Like if this is a book or something, you want all the words in the right order. So we can use the exact same thing, except we interpret it a little differently. If we interpret this as, oh, I've received everything up to and including sequence number 3, now we're good, right? Now this the sender knows by the time this sec3 ACK shows up, it knows they got everything, and we keep going. All right. Any problems with that? Yeah.
Yeah, what if the second packet is dropped?
Yeah, or even worse. Let's lose the first packet. All right. So now, what do we get to ACK? Nothing, right? Because now these are cumulative ACKs. So we can't even say you got anything. So now we're not even sending a packet. That's horrible, because now you got a 3-second wait here until you retransmit. Unless you adjust your round trip time, which we won't have time to discuss today, but I'll do some detailed demos on Monday. Okay, now we have to address this though. This is really bad. There's not even any feedback. So, is there anything we can do here to let the sender know that something went wrong?
Negative acknowledgement?
Yeah, so we could say, like, we already established this here. We're expecting this sequence number. Actually, we're expecting sec1, I guess, in this case, right? We got sorry about the numbering, this is awkward. So we expected the sec1, we didn't get sec1, we got sec2. So we could say, like, instead of act sec1, we can say that because we didn't get sec1, we can say, oh yeah, like, see this sec again. And then we got a couple more. Actually, we got one more. Again, we got the wrong one that we didn't want. So we send another one, all right? Just saying, okay, I'm still expecting sec 1 here. I got up to sec, now I'm expecting sec 1. Right? And you keep sending other stuff. So this is much better because now the recipient can tell, like it keeps getting repeated requests for the next packet, for the sec 1 packet, and nothing about these. So clearly we have to retransmit sec 1. So we'll do that, get that over. And depending on how the receiver wants to play this, right? You could say, I'm going to send everything again, 3 of them at the same time, but maybe that's not so good. We were losing packets here, right? If we're losing packets, it's probably because there's congestion along the way. Probably we shouldn't be filling up queues, so we lose even more packets, right? So we just send one. Probably best to just retransmit this one, so it makes it over. And then comes back an acknowledgement for sec 3 right away, right? We can do it that way, because we have these 2 packets already. We don't have to tell them to retransmit those 2. Like, we're done, right? So now the sender can send packet sec 4 again, and we're set. Okay, so cumulative acknowledgments are actually really powerful here. They're not perfect, because we had to tell the sender here that, oh, I didn't get any of these, right? That's essentially what we told it. There's something in TCP called selective acknowledgement, where you can say like, oh yeah, I've got everything up to here, and then I got that one and this one, but not the rest. Right? I don't know how popular that extension is, but this is sort of the general operation of the reliability, and then we'll talk about managing round trip time and start looking at congestion control next time. And then, of course, TCP specifics, the actual protocol, we'll get to that too. Okay, so please do get started on the homework, and I'll see you on Monday.